I think that will be all. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to be here this afternoon to telling of stories. But it will sort of surprise you guys, and I'm not going to be talking about media or television or anything like that. I'll be sharing stories, and it's pretty much experiences over the last 8 years, specifically over the last 2 years. I started Afia TV, I couldn't get a job. Nigeria happened to me at some point, and I couldn't get a job. So I figured, okay, what are the things that I know how to, as you heard from, I realized I know media, I know it pretty, and so something that was going to 2 years, in fact, a few months ago, I started a new TV show called Libations, which is really a way, since I own a TV channel, why don't you use it and, start a program of your own. So I started a program called Libations, which was really a show to sort of help me connect. Because for people who know me very well, they'll hear me saying that my first language is Pidgin. I learned Igbo when I did university here at ESUT. My first language is actually Pidgin. I grew up in the barracks. I'm what you call a barrack boy. Later on, obviously, coming back to university, picked on Igbo. But there are a few things in my life that I'm not quite confident. And I figured, having a show like this will enable me in having discussions with guests, will enable me sort of my way back, reconnect with my language and be able to sort of be that guy that will have conversations with his kids, and they will ask me stuff about my Igbo. Ask your uncle. So I wanted to be the guy that will be me those questions. I could answer them in some confidence. So I started the show, and I had this very interesting guest. I don't know how many of you here know of Ferdinand Danikwe. Brilliant guy. He's in the cultural circles here. In fact, he used to be, when I was DG of Film and Video Census Board, he was also DG of Center for Black and African Arts. Incredible gentleman, well-versed in culture. I had this conversation. Obviously, he's an Ozo. He's one of those people that wear those. When the first time I met someone like that, I was intrigued. I said, why is this gentleman wearing a bangle on Atalioku, as we call it? Why is he wearing this thing? I thought, kind of dodgy guy. But, discover that, that's part of the uniform of being a title holder. Anyhow, we had this conversation, and something struck me during our conversation when he talked about the Nzenozo group. He talked about some spiritual, magical things he talked about, but I was really intrigued, and it set me off a path to sort of ask questions. I also trained as a journalist, so I'm used to asking questions. Because the thing he put forward was that, and I see it, average Igbo person, we are Christian, but we're also traditional. And we dwell in two worlds. Very often, you see somebody, Goji, then he will end it Nafa Namwana Monso. You start to say to yourself, said that Ojada anu Igbo. Oda anu Beke. But in the same time, you're professing a Catholic ritual on top of and you're just amazed. Could it be that because of this, people who speak very good English call it contemporaneous existence, that we're living in two worlds at the same time, that might actually be one of the challenges or one of the things that has made us not develop at par. Because as it were, we're Africans, we're culturally versed, but at the same time, Christian, we're Western, but we're not really Western and Christian. So it's a bit confusing, and you find it. And I had this issue a few years ago in my village, I come from a village called Nume, not far from here. It's less than an hour in Kano East. There's this issue about land. And the gentleman who was aggrieved went to call the police. And the police officer to land matters said, no, we're not going to get involved in land matters. But that since there's a threat to life, we have to investigate. And so my lawyer said, look, since this is who owns the title, we will go back to the village, okay? And we will do a ritual to ascertain, since there's no title, it's a village land. So the people who support him will stand next to him, and the people who support the other party, that is my own family's party, will stand, and there will be some staff on the ground, and they will make a prayer. And those who believe that he owns the land will stand and support him using some kind of rope from a... Lo and behold, on the day that we were supposed to do this, the gentleman did not show up. So it tells me something and he is a knight of church, by the way. So it tells me something that, why is he afraid? But he could go to the police and attempt to use the Western traditional form of should I say, civil resolution or court or justice, but was at the same time afraid to go back to his roots or to use age-old how we know who owns what in a traditional setting. So it got me thinking that this way we live, is it, as I said, is it the reason why this conflict, this seeming benign conflict, is it some way in which we're not fully fulfilled? We can't imagine ourselves. You know, a friend of mine went to Israel. Femi Odugbemi is a fantastic filmmaker. For those of you who are in the film industry will know this name. And he posted something on Facebook a couple of years ago. What struck him was not the magnificence of the Israeli army when he went to the Knesset parliamentary building. Was that as you walked in, you could see stories of, they shared stories of the origin of Israel as a country. But more importantly, the ties of that they were people chosen by God. And they could assert it in the Bible. They could show you, by the way, Zionists don't even believe they don't believe in God's existence. But they had a story. So where is our own story of our creation, of our existence? Where is it? Where do we find the story of our creation, of our existence? If I ask any one of you here who comes from any village or any town, where is your origin story? Do we have a shared origin story of where we've come from as Igbo? We don't. So it brings me back to the question that I asked Ozo Ferdinand. I said, so what does this mean? Are we conflicted? And he said another thing which amazed me, and we've had discussions, because he said that, look, we had a civil war. Millions of people died. But you know, if someone dies in your hometown, the person. For those who don't understand Igbo, we'll do a funeral rite procession to bury the person properly. Of all those millions of people who have died during the war, who is it? How have they been buried? Akwago for akwa. Who is going to do it? Were they not our people? Are they not our people? And if so fundamentally in the power of the rites of passage, because every one of us here, those who are Igbo, you might imagine this. This is slightly but connected. We are probably the only people, as Africans, as Nigerians, you go to Zimbabwe, you say, and Africans, Zimbabweans and South Africans do lobola. Then they'll go to court. We do the same thing, wine carrying, and we'll go. Why? Because we're living, this is the two worlds existence. we're trying to satisfy this, at the same time we're trying to satisfy this. And it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of our energies. Our energies not in one place. Another story I'll share with you, sorry, the cooling here, I think I sweat a lot because my enemies are also looking at me in the audience. But this is the challenge though. When we had the worst genocide in Rwanda, the killing of the Tutsis, they had literally thousands of accused people that needed to go through the court process. You can't possibly do that using a Western, there's no way. You can't process those number of people, almost 100,000 people. You couldn't process it. And the traditional way in which we resolve things, and this is now the dichotomy, that if you look at the old African and indeed Igbo way in which we resolve conflict, it's not from victimization. We don't say we want to exact a pound of flesh. It is how do we settle, and let's settle the earth. Let's bring back peace. It's always about balance. It's about bringing back peace. And if that peace means that we have to we have to make sure your neighbor, you don't trade with your neighbor, we will do that so that you too will bring back peace. It's always about peace. But over the last couple of years, over the last 200-300 years, we've accepted a different idea of shall I say, of justice, which conflicts with our own. As you saw in the example I gave with one of my uncles in the village, over land. There's indeed a conflict. And that is a conflict we live in. So in Rwanda, they had this thing. How do we resolve this thing? How do we get 40-something thousand people, over 100,000 people, cases? They said, no, we have to go back to our old traditional system, the Gachaka system. I'm sure some of you have heard about it before. And that's what they use. It simply meant that if I admit that you had two choices. Either I accept and ask for some kind of restitution, a case closed, we move on. This is really how we do things. If you look at even the way we do our contracts, and I'm very glad my brother KOK my big brother KOK is here. And you saw that in the movie Ahamefuna. And you saw how we do our Nwaboy system. It's often about trust. It's not about, no one goes and signs a contract. Literally go to the man's house, to the chief's house, with some drinks, some cola nuts, we shake hands, deal is done. But how do you go and explain that 7-8 years later to a magistrate? And they ask you for contract, say, sign anything. He just gave me palm wine and some cola nut. So we're living in a permanent contradiction. And I think when I talked about Femi Odugbemi's story about Israel, the power of Israel, the power of nations in their stories, their origin stories, we don't have one. But we do have, because we lived here. The ancient Inri kingdom had, in fact, if you go to Igboku, you see pottery, you see steel works that they did 2,500 years ago. They were so magnificent. So people that made that art couldn't have been, as you saw, Mr. that we didn't have eyes. We had eyes in our breasts. It's not possible now. We had people, we had institutions, but our institutions, like anything, when you're a conquered person, you lose your institutions. You lose it to superior firepower. But it behoves us now to sort of find a way to connect, as I'm trying to connect with my own heritage, to connect with our heritage, to find ways individually in homes, in communities that we can at least, I'm not saying that all our cultures and traditions and things we did in the past were, as they say, the institutions gave us a story. And those stories are the stories that will ensure that we have what we call a shared consciousness. Because we don't have a shared consciousness right now. Not even amongst us in Igbo land. And that is a big tragedy. And without a shared consciousness, without an idea of who we are, where we're from, and how we live, and how we should live, if we can't imagine it collectively, we cannot make progress. And so all the strife we see on a day-to-day basis appears to me that it's because of this duality. And I'm not quite sure we can master this duality. Because if you go to Korea, they don't suffer from that. If you went to China, they don't suffer from that. If you went to Western or Eastern Europe, they don't suffer from that. They are singular about their own origin story. So for me, really, again, I'm not trying to give anyone here a singular line of thought to say light bulb. No, I'm not. This is not my doing. I cannot do that. I simply want to share my own story of what I'm dealing with, what I'm trying to process. I'm asking questions, asking myself questions, asking colleagues, and asking people within my own world, my own sphere of influence as well. And I hope that if I've achieved anything in the last 12, 15 minutes, it's that we all begin to ask ourselves questions. How? Some of you may be very good in navigating both worlds. I'm not that good, I must confess. Just before we started, some young lady came up to me and we were talking about religion and I said, look, I pretty much lost my religion, but I found my humanity. I am not, if you look closely, you see I'm wearing, I'm Catholic by foundation. But it also means that I understand, gone through, means that I understand profoundly what it means to be human. In some of the challenges I've gone through over the last 8-9 years, people who have showed me love, have been of immense, been my benefactors, have not been my people of my Catholic faith. This friend of mine, his name is Taj. You know, he is someone who has stood by me, who, in fact, I sent him a message a couple of days ago. My wife reminded me of something. I sent him Taj, thank you for everything. And he goes, guy, is everything all right? Are you about to do something silly to yourself? I said, no, I just, Eugenia reminded me and I said, let me share this. Let me just tell you again. Because even us as men, we don't do a good job of telling each other that we love each other. But that's it. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the rest of it. Thank you, guys.